adquisición de una cultura y una visión determinada. Pero también se revelan las barreras y las normas no escritas de un museo, cómo otros fenómenos más amplios, más específicos o más diversos operan al interior del museo. Estos elementos dotan de sentido e historicidad su paso en el Met. Los museos de arte tienen prácticas que determinan la creación, difusión, exhibición, investigación, colección y preservación de los bienes culturales. Gran parte de las historias particulares detrás de cada uno de estos objetos del museo quedan documentadas en los tradicionales archivos administrativos. Sin embargo, estas instituciones operan a través de complejos tejidos de agentes. El cúmulo de las acciones de estos personajes con sus redes, expectativas y agendas particulares determina el devenir del museo y su agencia sobre los bienes en los que incide. Esta ponencia propone que es necesario incentivar estrategias de documentación adicional que permitan entender, examinar y repensar el papel y acciones del museo a través de los hilos que entrelazan las vivencias y experiencias particulares de los agentes que inciden directa o indirectamente en dichas instituciones. En las últimas décadas se han generado nuevos enfoques sobre lo social y lo político dentro de lo anticuado de lo biográfico, siendo las renovadas visiones de las experiencias y las acciones individuales un pilar para entender amplios fenómenos como podían ser las cambiantes prácticas institucionales de un museo. Los desarrollos de la historia oral han hecho de la entrevista una herramienta clave. En el desarrollo sobre este tema que sostendré en los próximos minutos, cabe hacer mención que parto como historiador del arte interesado en el estudio de los museos y la historia de las exposiciones internacionales y que he encontrado utilidad en las entrevistas, es decir, parto de la posición de investigador y no desde la visión de la documentación. Haré un breve repaso histórico de cómo llega la entrevista a los archivos de los museos para argumentar las virtudes que ésta genera. Y es que todo empezó desde las necesidades que dieron origen a la historia oral contemporánea tras la segunda posguerra. Esta fue animada desde dos frentes. Por un lado, la exigencia desde la historia social británica de corte marxista de ampliar la mirada hacia otros sujetos que no fueran las élites. El gran problema de las clases marginadas es que no producen, por sus condiciones sistémicas, documentación sobre sus vidas. Por otro lado, el trauma de la guerra hizo imperativo dar explicación de lo reciente a los historiadores. Ambas posiciones derivaron en la búsqueda por crear fuentes que ampliaran su mirada a otros sujetos y al presente. La entrevista se planteó como la opción clave. Desde 1949 en Estados Unidos se hicieron esfuerzos institucionales por crear grandes acervos de fuentes orales. La inclusión de las entrevistas en el campo de las artes se contextualiza en estos proyectos. En 1958, the Smithsonian Institute creó el Oral History Program en su Archives of American Art. Este ha sido el proyecto más sistemático, sostenido y de mayor dimensión que ha hecho uso de la historia oral vinculado a las artes. En la actualidad, el acervo cuenta con 2.300 entrevistas a artistas, coleccionistas, dealers, críticos, curadores y otros profesionistas. La historia oral tuvo un segundo gran momento dentro del campo artístico a finales del siglo XX y principios del XXI. Este estuvo muy ligado a la consolidación de una visión más social y política en la historia del arte gracias a trabajos claves en las décadas previas y, de forma más relevante para este tema, el énfasis en lo curatorial y el auge de los estudios de los museos y las historias de las exposiciones. En estos años, varios museos iniciaron proyectos sistemáticos de entrevistas para la documentación de sus instituciones. Un ejemplo de esto es el Oral History Project del Metropolitan Museum of Art de Nueva York, cuyo objetivo se señaló como to preserve memories of the institution as seen through the eyes of those people who knew it well and helped to shape it. También se puede situar en este contexto a la conferencia Can Oral History Make Objects Speak de la ICO en el 2002, en el que se discutieron experiencias curatoriales asociadas a este tipo de documentación. Las razones del boom de la entrevista para complementar la documentación de los museos y sus exposiciones se debe a varias razones. La primera es la necesidad de un enfoque interdisciplinario que requiere su estudio. Por ejemplo, la asistente curatorial que entrevisté estuvo sometida a fenómenos de discriminación y demográficos, intelectuales, estéticos del multiculturalismo, financieros derivados de las crisis globales de los años 70 y 80, entre otros. Todo esto le sucedió a ella, pero también son fenómenos que determinaron su agencia sobre el museo. Al tratarse de instituciones centrales, complejas y el rostro más público del mundo del arte, existe dentro de ellas una entremezcla de procesos económicos, políticos, sociales y artísticos. Es decir, el uso de la entrevista no solo permite entender la trayectoria de un personaje por sí mismo, sino se convierte en una herramienta metodológica para rastrear la construcción, existencia, transformación y perpetración en lo social de redes, acciones y dinámicas que involucran y determinan al museo. Por otro lado, el caso del asistente curatorial del MED también muestra la potencia de la entrevista de documentar otros tipos de agentes y a las pequeñas acciones, lo cotidiano y lo vivencial dentro de un museo, su relación con el mundo del arte o fenómenos de otras áreas. Esto permite diversificar los problemas, enfoques o temas que son posibles explorar dentro de los estudios de museos. Finalmente, también resalta el énfasis historiográfico en los fenómenos recientes que muchas veces queda opacado por tendencias académicas o por políticas de archivos. Esto sin obviar que se quedan como documentos que perduran para que nuevos ojos regresen a explorarlos décadas después. Considero que la entrevista permite replantear las maneras de estudiar los museos, romper la linealidad de las narrativas, combinar los análisis estructurales sincrónicos con los procesos de transformación diacrónicos y o visualizar la multiplicidad de niveles que conforman y se involucran en el museo. Dentro de mi experiencia ha habido cuatro grandes y exitosas tendencias para la creación y el uso de las entrevistas en la documentación de los museos. La primera, grandes proyectos que buscan resguardar la memoria de un museo, como el ya mencionado del MET. Otros semejantes son esfuerzos puntuales por hacer de la historia de una institución que derivan en la publicación editada de las entrevistas. Un ejemplo de esto es MoMA PS1 a History. También están las entrevistas realizadas desde museos como complementos al registro de un proyecto artístico o de una exhibición. Ejemplo de estos son los que se han hecho y archivado en el MOAC, tanto en la parte de, ¿cómo se llama? Artística como documental, que sí, Arquella, pero también en la parte artística, ¿no? Finalmente están los que derivan en investigaciones realizadas, bueno, aquí está la foto de Arquella. Finalmente están los que derivan en investigaciones realizadas por estudiosos del campo que abordan aspectos específicos vinculados a sus trabajos. Sin embargo, a pesar del uso exitoso y diverso de las entrevistas, es claro que la mayoría está dentro de instituciones del norte global. Este tipo de documentación requiere equipos dedicados a la planeación, ejecución y transcripción de las entrevistas. Por lo tanto, un mayor dinero que muchas veces no existe. Con esta ponencia invito a una intensificación de los mecanismos, políticas y presupuestos institucionales para la creación y adquisición de entrevistas desde y para la documentación de museos. Es una herramienta que viene desde otras trincheras, genera interdisciplina y aporta mucho a nuestro campo. Y además, pues, escuchando la conferencia inaugural de ayer, pues también creo que abona a lo que nos invitaba nuestro ponente magistral de ayer. Muchas gracias.
Nuestro ponente mío. Vamos a pasar a nuestra siguiente ponencia y dejamos al final las preguntas. ¿Quieres sentarte aquí? Te vas, donde estés más cómodo. Muchas gracias. Sí. Pero va a ser una entrevista. Esta es una presentación pregrabada. Esperamos que se conecte también para la sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Esta presentación lleva por título Preservation and Digitalization Case Study of, no, es imposible, PSMMA, Museo Kolkata en India. Pues muchas gracias. Vamos.
Warm greetings to all of you. I'm Pratiti Mandal, PhD research scholar of Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda, Gujarat, which is in India. Today I'm going to talk about preservation and digitization, a case study on PCMMA Kolkata. So firstly, I'd like to thank Cidoc for giving me this opportunity to talk about my paper in this prestigious conference. So I'll directly jump into the paper. So who was PCM and what is PCMMA? So PCM is Prashanta Chandra Mahalanobis, who was also known as the father of Indian statistics, who has discovered the Mahalanobis distance, which is a very important formula in statistics. So what is PCMMA? It is basically a museum which is built on the memory of this great eminent personality, which is named after him, which is called Prashanta Chandra Mahalanobis Memorial Museum and Archives. PCM has completed his school and college from Calcutta. Later, for the further studies in statistics, he has went to Cambridge University, and in the latter phase of his life, he contributed his knowledge and everything to the community of India. So what is the history of museum? Firstly, to know the history of museum, we need to know the history of ISI, which is Indian Statistical Institute. Firstly, it was just a laboratory in Presidency College. Later, it was permanently shifted from that college to the house of Prashanta Chandra Mahalanobis, which you can see it in background. The house was named Amropali, which was the name was given by the Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore. Then after that, when the house was shifted, later the campus was built around it. So this was the first place when the Indian Statistical Institute started its journey from Calcutta. Now it has spread all over the country. The institutes are all over the country, we can find them. And also the history of museum also starts from this building, because now this building has been transformed into the museum, which was once resided by Professor Mahalanobis and his wife Nirmal Kumari Mahalanobis. So what is the collection of the museum? So as the museum is a memorial museum, so we can understand the collection is based mainly on the utilitarian items that was used by the professor and his wife, from the wide range of furnitures to cutlery and etc. Apart from that, museum have a wide range of collection of archival materials like photographs, and important letters by Mahalanobis and important personalities are also in the collection of the museum. The museum is one of the functional unit of the library, because the library documentation and information science division occupies a very unique space in the academic and research activities of the institute. Over the decades, this library has been the richest libraries in the country. And currently this library occupies about 5 floors and have 56,000 square feet area. And this library have very other functional units like reprography, photography, and museum is an integral part of it. So the archival materials has been preserved and conserved by various preventive and curative techniques by the museum and by the designated conservation staff. But those archival data is also digitized, their collection, for communicating and to be more sustainable for the future and for the museum, and which is very important and will be very accessible to the visitors and communities out there. So due to the digitization, the journals and archival materials that the museum have, which is a very rich collection of them, have access to their e-databases, staff and students. And the institution recently joined into DSpace, which is a digital repository for all the universities. In that space, museum have their own interface where they publish all their where they deposit all their archival materials, as well as e-journals, e-articles, and etc. And the institute have a control over insights and how much data is retrieved through that interface. So this is the interface of the e-access or remote access, which is only given to staff and students of the Indian Statistical Institute. Then I'm going to talk about digital preservation to digital marketing, how it is interconnected. So in museum, most of the objects or the artifacts is updated and digitized. Why? Because the archival collection is more compared to the object collections. So which made a digital marketing possible for every social networking sites. So by the term digital marketing, I'm not talking about revenue generation, but about the museum branding and publicity among the wider range of community and making them aware about the contribution of Prashant Chandra Mahalanobis to the community more. So, and all the archival data are scanned through digital scanners, which is present inside the museum. So this is what I'm talking about, how they're using social networking sites and to communicate with a wider range of the potential visitors. They're not only talking about the present day activities, but also they're talking about the old archival material and the important events that happened to the history of the museums and the history of statistics with the life of Prashant Chandra Mahalanobis. This has been a huge success for the museum, and the results have been very promising from the beginning, because we can see there is a wide reach of the posted content, as well as the engagement is also very good, because people were not really aware about the contribution of Prashant Chandra Mahalanobis, as well as are not aware about the events that was happened that particular period of time. So this museum is using its preserved digital collection to communicate with this community more and create a very good engagement, which is very beneficial for the museum and sustainable, and for the potential visitors as well. So lastly, I'd like to say that digitization is to preserve the collection. Marketing that collection led to the publicity of the museum and creating a brand of the museum, and hence it is very sustainable for the current scenario, because we can see most of the museums out there have been preserved the collection and preserved the collection digitally to the wider range, to access the wider range of the audience and benefiting them as well as themselves as a museum. So lastly, I'd like to say thank you so much for listening to me. Feel free to connect to me in this email ID. I'd be love to answer your questions. And currently, I'm working on a lot of projects related to digitization of the collection and communicating with the communities out there in India. Thank you so much for listening.
Como es una máquina, no la aplaudimos. Y no está conectada, ¿verdad?
No, no se conecta.
Pues entonces tenemos un tiempo para entrevistarte, Santiago, para llenarte de preguntas. Y bueno, tienen tiempo para aprovechar y visitar la biblioteca. Ah, ¿llegó Ali? Ah, Ali o Jonathan. Ah, muy bien. Ay, perdón, Jonathan. Bien. Tenemos uno de nuestros ponentes que venía tarde porque todo se ha ido atrasando. La siguiente presentación corre a cargo de Jonathan Wilson y el título es Digitalizing Community Photographic Archives in, no sé qué es, I-U-I-A. No, sorry.
So, yes, my talk is about the digitization of community photographic archives that we've been doing in Alula in Saudi Arabia.
Es que está en minúsculas es una abreviación.
That's a PDF. Okay, that's this. Yep. Is this forward back? My name's Jonathan Wilson. I'm the collections manager for the Royal Commission of Alula. Apologies, one of my colleagues, Mohammed Al-Bahahi, was supposed to be coming as well, but unfortunately he couldn't get his visa to travel to Mexico. Alula is located in the northeast of Saudi Arabia, and it has a long natural and human history to it. We have had archaeological evidence going back 7,000 years and human occupation for about 200,000 years. So Alula contains Saudi Arabia's first UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is Hegra, which is a Nabatean city south of Petra. And I work for the Royal Commission for Alula. This was established by the Crown Prince in 2018 to document and preserve the historic and natural landscape of Alula, and also begin to prepare it for tourists as part of the kind of transformation of the Saudi economy. So in 2018, there were 0 visitors to Alula. Last winter season, we had 270,000. So there's been a great growth. Alongside that, we do a lot of work with the local community, both in terms of upskilling and training them and working with them to present them. Alula itself only has a population of 25,000 people, so we're a very small place. So when you bring in 270,000 visitors, that does tend to overwhelm the community. So we're working with them on the infrastructure and the visitor facilities to create a new visitor experience. So as I said, I'm the collections manager for the Royal Commission. When we started in 2018, we didn't have a collection. There was nothing in place at all. There was a large archaeological sites. And one of the first things we started to do was try to identify photographic archives that existed that covered our region. If you're not aware, Saudi Arabia historically has been quite a hard country to travel to. It did not give out visas other than pilgrim visas to Medina and Mecca. So we began to look for photographic archives that existed that we could begin to build up our history of the area. The area has had a long history. It was part of the Ottoman Empire. And so at the turn of the 20th century, the Ottomans built the Hijaz Railway that linked Istanbul to Medina. Once the railway was built in 1907, that allowed people to travel much more easily to Alula. And so some of the first travelers on the train were Fathers Josselin and Sauvignac, 2 Dominican friars from Jerusalem, who came down and took a full photographic archive of the biblical archaeology that exists in Alula and some of our heritage sites. Their archive still exists in Jerusalem, in the School of Biblical Archaeology there, and they have digitized that, and we license images from them of the 400 or 500 glass plates that they have showing Alula. Other travelers came down on the railway between 1907 and 1920. And part of this reflects the different ways that we've tried to build our collection. So the Royal Geographic Society in London and the Frobenius Institute both held photographs of different travellers who travelled down the railway line. Dr. Clemo was a cholera doctor who ran the cholera station at Madan Sala that the pilgrims had to pass through before they could enter Mecca and Medina. And Leo Frobenius was a very unsuccessful spy who stopped in Alula on his way to Eritrea. So these are all collections that we work with other archives to digitize, and we take digital copies. As I said, we started in 2018 with no collection, but in that, since 2018, in the last 5 years, we've started to build our collection. So we bought a copy of Maritza's book, which he photographed the railway line from Palestine down to Mecca, including stopping at Alula station. Other travellers came down. Mosul was another unsuccessful World War I spy who came to Alula and took photographs. After World War I, the railway was destroyed, and that made travel much harder to Alula again. So between the 1930s, we only have records of one traveller coming through, which was a English gentleman called Harry St. John Philby. And his archive now exists in the University of Oxford. He has a large archive there because he was a friend of the founder of Saudi Arabia, Ibn Saud. So they hold his archive there. And again, they digitize that and we take the digital copies of those. Coming into the 1960s, car travel became a bit more common. And so a number of diplomatic missions and embassies in Riyadh sent their ambassadors up to Alula to see the sites. Peter Crowe was one of those. In 1968, the Saudi government invited University College London to send a archaeological survey of the area. And that was conducted by a group of 8 archaeologists. 1968, the leader of that mission was Peter Parr. He is now getting quite elderly. And so we've been working with a number of these archaeologists who came to actually encourage them to donate their photographic collections back to Saudi Arabia. So Peter Parr donated his collection back to us of about 1,000 photographs ranging in the late 1960s that we've been working on and digitizing them. And from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, again, there were a number of different travelers who came through. And for each of these, we've been encouraging them to donate or give their collections to the Royal Commission. So the Naami archive is significant because that's our first film footage. He flew an aeroplane over the area in the 1960s and made a colour film of it, which we now have in the collection. William Facey developed the museums in Saudi Arabia in the 1980s and travelled around extensively, and he's now donated his photographic archive to us. And Robert Hurd was a company that was actually doing renovation work in the 1980s and employed a photographer. We actually found those photographs in a cupboard when we took over a building, which has been very nice for us. So we have all these travellers coming through, but we didn't have any photographs from the people of Alula. And there are a couple of historic reasons for this. One being that camera ownership was incredibly rare. Nobody actually owned any cameras. It wasn't until the 1950s that there was a requirement for children attending school to have a photograph taken for their school record. And that was the first time that people had portrait photography. We think the first person to own a camera in the town wasn't until the 1970s. So there is not a history of the local community taking photographs. But we felt it was important that we had all these travelers coming in and taking photographs of the sites, but no photographs from the actual people. So the approach we took with the travelers was we encouraged them to donate their archives to us. For the local community, we actually want them to keep their photographs. So we offer that we take those in, we digitize them, and then we give the original photographs back to them, along with an explanation of what their rights are over the photographs, and then we license them from them. And then alongside the digitization of the photographs, we work on oral histories with them to try and understand what's in the photographs and how they fit in. So the first family that one of the main families that we've worked with is a local photographer called Omar Alwan. Omar has actually passed away, so his photographic archive was sitting in boxes in his majlis. A majlis is a formal greeting room that you have in your house for greeting guests. And Omar Alwan had done a lot of work to try and promote Alula as a site. So he had taken lots of photographs of our sites like Hegra and Elephant Rock. But he also took a lot of photographs of everyday events that happened in the late 1980s and 1990s. So we did a lot of work with the family to let them lend us the photographs to start digitizing them. Now, alongside the copyright of the photographer, under Saudi law, if you have your photograph taken, you have rights in it as well. So every person in a photograph has a right over that photograph, as do all their descendants and family. So when we're dealing with photographs of people, there's a lot of people involved. So we have to speak with the families to try and find out what was the event, who was there, did they know they were being photographed, and then are they happy for us to take the photograph and share them? And what we say with the families is that if they are not, we will still digitize them, we'll give them the digital copies back, but we won't actually keep any photographs of people who did not know. So Omar Alwan was a large collection that we're still working on. And if this works, hopefully I can take you into his majlis. Oh. No, the video won't play, I don't think. So I work on the digitization and collection. We also have a number of anthropologists that come in, intangible cultural heritage experts, and we bring them in when we go and visit these families to talk through their photographs, to try and capture some of the stories that go around it. When we're documenting these photographs, we're not looking to try and identify each one with a title and a date. We're actually trying to get a whole story. Because when we look at the traveler photographs, we get specific dates that they traveled. They tend to have kept journals, so we know the date they happened. When we're dealing with the family photographs and we ask for dates, they will give us the time of year a photograph was taken. So it was taken in the summer or the winter. They won't actually know which year it was taken. The year isn't what they remember. They remember the event and they remember the time of year and what was happening. So that is what we try to record. So it's a long-term commitment to us to try and build relationships with the community. So Ibrahim is a community member, and he actually came to us with his photographic or a selection of some of the photographs that he had taken of the Old Town area of Alula, which was abandoned in the 1980s. And the reason that he came to us was that we we let people know we were doing some renovation work to the minaret of the mosque there, and we really needed historic photographs of the mosque. So he was able to come along and give us a selection of photographs of the minaret, along with other photographs of Old Town in the 1980s. As I said earlier, camera ownership was not particularly common, and Suleiman was, we think, and he believes, was the first person in the town to own a camera. He got one in the 1970s and took a great range of photographs of the town. Unfortunately, in the 1980s, all his photographs were destroyed, as was his camera. So, and then he started again in the late 1980s. But during COVID, he wrote his autobiography and self-published it. And after he did that, we spoke with him about, as he'd done that, was he then willing to start sharing more publicly his photographs, which he has done. So it continues to be an ongoing process for us with the community. But our main focus in terms of digitizing the collections, we're trying to keep a digital record of a community that within a couple of years will be very tourist focused from a time when it was not. So to try and preserve their memory and also encourage them to understand the importance of the photographic collections that they hold. But if you want to find any more information out about Alula, this is our two websites, or if you want to visit. And thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Jonathan. You were very precise with your time. Well, we don't have the other presenter, right? Well, we are open for questions for our speakers.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan, for a very interesting presentation. I just need to ask about something, because you're building the new archives, like digital archives for Angola, which is really great. But do you have any plans, or the Royal Commission of Angola have any plans for displaying this in a museum? Because I recently moved to Saudi Arabia, and from what I noticed, Saudi Arabia really needs to open new museums. So do you hear of any plans about it?
Yes, we do. As I said, we actually have William Facey's archive. Alula had a museum, well, had a museum in the 1960s and had one from the 1980s. We do have plans to build new museums in Alula. And we also use quite a lot of the photographic material, gets used quite a lot in kind of our social media and marketing. And we do have a number of books and publications that come out. We do hope to take our collections online as well, so that they're available. And then nationally in Saudi Arabia, there is a plan for a museum building program, but they're slightly behind where we are. So we would hope to get a new museum open in Alula in probably about 3 years' time. We're breaking ground on a new building in October. Thank you.
¿Alguien más? ¿Comentarios? ¿Preguntas?
Jonathan?
You don't have your translation.
I don't. Marie, have you got can I borrow your translator thing?
¿Quieres jalarte este?
Look.
Bueno,
Oh.
Gracias. Quería saber qué cantidad de material fotográfico tienen en el museo y qué tipo de procesos fotográficos. ¿Qué tipo de-
So in terms, if your question is what type of photographic material do we have? What type of photographic material we have and then what kind of digitization we have? So primarily what we hold ourselves as archive material mostly dates from the 1960s forward. So the 1960s material, there's 35mm slide, 16mm cine film, and black and white and color prints. We then have a large collection of 1980s slides. I would say the color is lasting better on the 1960s material. The color on the 1980s material is beginning to suffer quite a lot. And then we have a lot of print material from the 1980s. We do take donations of digital photographs now. So we do have a couple of CDs that were done in the early 2000s, and now we take purely born digital files that we keep on a server. In terms of digitization equipment, we have 2 A3 scanners, a film scanner, a 3D scanner, a film scanner, and then an A3 photo scanner as well. So we can cope with most photographic material in-house. When we come to cine film, however, we send out moving film to Germany, and we get that digitized there. We don't keep that equipment. And whenever we do that, we don't have a lot of it, but we do have to take a decision as to that process is very detrimental to the 16mm film. So whenever we do that, we then never play the actual original 16mm film again. We only allow people to use the digital files. But the other archives, EBAF, for instance, they've got 1907 glass plates that were carried back on camels from Alula to Jerusalem, and they're in beautiful condition. The families themselves, they tend to mostly have the photographic prints. They didn't keep any of the negative stock. So that's why we're trying to work through their photographic prints. And if you saw on some of the photographs, you'll see there's tears because they've all been stuck together. So alongside the digitization of the family ones, we repackage them for them in archival materials so that hopefully they'll last longer with them. I hope that answers your question.
¿Alguna pregunta más? Ah, yo también tengo. Nicolás.
I'll just talk loudly.
Okay.
Jonathan, you mentioned about the need to track the rights on images to family members and their descendants. It sounds like potentially that's an endless task. Are you having to keep a sort of genealogical database as well to keep track of that?
But thank you for that. If you didn't hear the question because of the microphone, the question is around rights. So we have two lots of rights. We have we do the rights, a very simple license agreement, which is licensing it from the photographer. But then we do track families. Now, there are 13 main families in the town. So we don't track every individual family member. What we try to do is make sure we know who the most senior person is in each family, so that if we ever need to talk to them, we can go back to them. Because alongside the photographic elements, we're also doing archaeological work on the houses that these families used to live in. So we have to talk to them a lot about the things that are found in the houses and, you know, do they want them back in the family or do they want us to keep them at the museum for them? And about 50% of the time they want them back and about 50% of the time. But yes, there's a lot of ongoing conversations with the community. We are encouraging them as much as possible to see it as their collection, that we're not some big government entity that's coming in and taking over. This bit of the organization is much more personal to them. And we are quite happy to delete digital files off our systems or return things to them if a member of the family wants. But we will then normally just go to the most senior person in the family and check with them first. And if they want it to happen, they'll talk to family members for us without us having to go and find every individual person. Okay.
¿Alguien más? Bueno, yo voy a hacer... a la derecha.
¿Quieres preguntar aquí? No, no está bien. Hablo fuerte. Santiago, ¿sabes si hay alguna iniciativa de documentación museística en Latinoamérica de oralidad?
Bueno, la pregunta fue si había una iniciativa museística para los que están en línea, en Latinoamérica. Sí, hay algunas, ¿no? Como mencioné, hay muchas más y mucho más sistemático en el norte, ¿no? Global. Hay mucho más en arte contemporáneo, ¿no? Muchos más cuestiones sistemáticas en arte contemporáneo. No sé si tú me desmentirás, pero creo que tiene que ver un poquito con una mayor conciencia de que hay que ampliar mucho más sobre los objetos y procesos museales, museísticos contemporáneos. Y en museos de arte moderno o más antiguo, como que se asume que solo está ahí y es obvio por sí mismo, ¿no? Sobre eso es en el registro de obras de arte, ¿no? Y proyectos artísticos. Por ejemplo, insisto, yo estoy hablando como usuario y productor de entrevistas, pero no documentador. Bueno, no me encargo de la archivística, pero por ejemplo, yo en el MUAC encuentro que sí es uno de los museos que más entrevistas tiene y hace. La parte más sistemática, desde mi punto de vista, es la parte de documentar la cuestión artística, ¿no? No tanto la parte documental. Hay algunas que están ahí, ¿no? Pero no, que yo sepa, no hay un proyecto sistemático que, por ejemplo, pudiéramos documentar a los mismos trabajadores de los museos, ¿no? ¿Por qué no, no sé si exista el proyecto, pero todas estas personas que, por ejemplo, no sé, Graciela de la Torre, podríamos entrevistarla, ¿no? ¿Por qué no? ¿No? O entrevistar, por ejemplo, desde la UNAM a los distintos gente que esté a punto de jubilarse o no, o sobre distintos proyectos, curadores, trabajadores en distintos niveles de los museos de la UNAM. Eso no existe. Por ejemplo, un proyecto muy sistemático de historia oral que existe, lo tiene el Mora, ¿no? El Instituto Mora. Algo que ya no mencioné, México replica estos proyectos de hacer grandes bases de datos de documentos orales en los 70, encabezados por Eugenia Meyer, y quien ha heredado un poco eso es Graciela de Garay, que se encuentra en el Mora, y Graciela de Garay se dedica mucho a hacer todo un archivo de arquitectos, ¿no? Pero así como en museos, que haya que haya proyectos sistemáticos, así como los que menciono en Estados Unidos o en otros países, no es tan claro en Latinoamérica, ¿no?
Una preguntita, perdónenme. Creo que sus dos ponencias se unen en un punto clave que es la oralidad. O sea, me sorprende que no haya habido ninguna fotografía y la forma en la que entiendes ahora esos registros es a partir de comunicarte con las familias y que te expliquen un poco lo que estaban retratando. Entonces estaría súper interesante ir a haciendo ese registro sistemático, entender a la oralidad también como un medio de comunicación, de construcción de la memoria. Porque te perdiste la plática de Santiago, pero Santiago hablaba de registrar oralmente todas estas historias que están atravesadas o atraviesan al museo. Y me parece muy interesante construir un archivo fotográfico también a partir de la memoria de todas estas familias que estuvieron ahí registradas de alguna forma. Pero me voy a pasar a ti. A mí me parece importantísimo en México la historia de la oralidad en las instituciones, porque todo lo que estuvieron exponiendo en los eventos previos al Cidoc hablaba de esos agentes. O sea, en México, como no hay políticas, no hay registros, no, o sea, hay muchas carencias a nivel de documentación, entonces lo que ha provocado muchos movimientos es la agencia, las personas y sus voluntades. Entonces está desde ahí, o sea, justo Graciela de la Torre, o sea, cuando Graciela de la Torre está en un lugar, se siente que está Graciela de la Torre por todas las dinámicas que cambia la institución, y cuando se va, la institución regresa a un impas. Entonces sí es importante, creo, empezar un proyecto así de estos agentes y que activan y que propician en las instituciones, porque en el arte contemporáneo es evidente que se mueve a partir de voluntades.
Bueno, sí, y digo, todo este tema lo tuve que solo lanzar una idea en 10 minutos, ¿no? Pero creo que habría muchas acotaciones de las posibilidades de la historia oral. Clasifiqué 4 categorías, pero cada una nos genera distintas posibilidades, ¿no? Desde ir entrevistando a estos grandes personajes desde ciertos puntos correctos para obtener mucho más de lo que queda registrado en las fuentes tradicionales, ¿no? Como hubiera sido Graciela. Pero también, por ejemplo, ¿no? Existe, que es como un poco el ejemplo que pongo, ¿no? De otros personajes que existen dentro de las instituciones que también podrían ser muy entrevistables y que además su agencia no queda documentada, ¿no? No hay vestigios de su paso y pienso de, no sé, yo tengo muchos conocidos que trabajan en un nivel que no firman cartas, no firman proyectos, pero ahí están trabajando, generando impulsos, creando visiones, etcétera, ¿no? Y que inciden en la institución y que también, o sea, por otro lado, existe una cuestión de que nos puede revelar, más allá de aquí en entrevistas, niveles que no están en las fuentes tradicionales, no se quedan documentados ahí. Y esto, como dices, es muy claro en el arte contemporáneo, pero también no es tan obvio en otros museos que ahí está, ¿no? Y cuántas personas han pasado por ahí, como decía, ¿no? En el proyecto del MoMA, ¿no? Conocen bien a la institución y han ayudado a delinearla, ¿no? Ay, no me viene la palabra, pero sí, o sea, y por eso también hay distintos tipos de proyectos, ¿no? Están los proyectos muy sistemáticos como el del Met, ¿no? Pero también una institución pequeña como el PS1 puede de repente pretender hacer un proyecto de que a través de la historia oral genera una historia institucional, ¿no? Porque es una institución mucho más pequeña que el Met, no puedes hacer la historia institucional, pero puedes ir haciendo esta cuestión sistemática y por eso a través de la pregunta de Betsabe se me ocurría, o sea, ¿por qué no una institución como la UNAM, ¿no? Que tiene tantos museos y incide tanto en el mundo del arte a muchos niveles, ¿no? Podría tener un proyecto sistemático de ir, y cuántas personas que se dedican al arte y a lo mejor ya no están en la UNAM han pasado por la UNAM, ¿no? Entonces, creo que sería fundamental tener proyectos así, ¿no? Como por ejemplo el que tiene el Mora, pero el Mora no va hacia los museos, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, creo que una institución que tiene tantos museos y tiene tanta incidencia en el mundo del arte podría tener un proyecto así, ¿no? Claro, sí, pero no tan sistemáticos, ¿no?
Yes, we alongside the work that we do, we also do have like we have what's called the Saudi Heritage Preservation Society, which is a national organization that looks after kind of oral history recording and also dialect recording, identification of words. And what we do is we work with them both on our photographic material and also our object collection to try and use them as both prompts to people talking about oral history, but also when they've completed oral history, then they try and highlight things that we might be able to find. So we're trying to build the connections between the two things. The other element that we work on is obviously there's one-on-one interviews, but generally we try and do more community-based things because the groups like to come together to talk about a shared experience, and they each add their own contribution. So a lot of, particularly the photographs that we have of people tend to be more, they don't tend to be family setting groups, they tend to have been some sort of community event that happened. So we don't necessarily get everyone who was in the photograph, but certainly people from different families. And then together we have these recordings of different people adding their different perspectives of it. And then what we try not to do is then come out with what we consider our version of the truth is, because we say, you know, each of them have their perspective of what it is. It's not for me to say which one was right or who did what. It's just to say these are the different perspectives on those things.
Thank you very much. We have a question for you from our audience in YouTube. I can see. I think the name is Malot Ingel, and her question is, have you ever encountered in a way some resistance from the community in relation to the project?
Well, I would say at the start, there was a reticence for people to share their private photographs, because it's their family photographs. It's not something they would be comfortable normally showing to other people. But Omar Alwan self-published a couple of books on Alula. So our starting point with that family was to look at the photographs that he'd already published and then start looking at his other photographs. But we have worked with other families who we have their digitized photographs, but we don't release them. If people want to use them, we will call the family and talk to them directly and say, can someone come and do it? So it's not resistance, it's just, it's a journey. If you think we've only been going 5 years, like there's no history of people saying, hand over your photographs to some other organization to use them. If you're not used to hearing that, it's a bit of a journey that you need to go on. But we had a summit with like 300 international guests, and there was some families represented in some of the photographs. So I sent them to them, and they were super happy that this was happening. So it's a journey that we go on with them, but we also say, at any point we can delete a digital file for them. We don't have to keep it if they get uncomfortable. Now, where that tends to come in more into play is particularly when we've got photographs of people when they were children, and we're now dealing with them as adults. They don't necessarily want the photograph of what they were doing not that they were doing anything bad, but normally when there's children in the photographs, we then get a bit more careful with people and say, do you know who that family member is and where they came from? And then we also have photographs of people who are workers in there, and we just can't trace who they were because they were traveling with. But I would say it's more a journey that I think when we first started doing it, there was concern about what it would look like. But I think most of the community families that we work with know that they can come and find us, and we're not disappearing into an office.
Yeah, you managed to build trust.
Yeah.
And yes. Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. I'll do it in English to make it fast. While I was listening to you, it's a comment. When you said, Joanna, how orality connected the stories of Santiago and Jonathan, I was thinking how orality came into context when he talked about rights. So there was a specific need. And then orality comes into context with Santiago wanting to know the story of the institutions. And with the questions, we talk about the story of the artists at MUAC, for example, or MIT, Met Museum, or the researcher at the Instituto Mora that works with architects, I believe. And in our case, in the office where I work, we document a story to find the story of the collections. So we're interested in the life of people that are there in terms of how they influence the space and how they are memory of that collection in particular. So my comment is that how orality also comes out a partir from the interest that we have. No, it's not just like orality is there. So the needs that we have will bring the part of the life of the person, of the institution, of the rights of families, and that's what I wanted to comment. It's too diverse too.
Muchas gracias. Sí, como mi punto es que hay que sistematizar también la documentación de las prácticas orales porque sí están dando y contribuyendo mucho a la colección, a los objetos, a cómo ese objeto se entiende dentro del museo y cómo ese museo se entiende dentro de una margen institucional. Entonces, si la oralidad es momento de tener una forma de estudiarla también, porque es muy fácil platicar y después todo eso se pierde porque no hay un registro propio ni un sistema que ayude a estudiarlo.
Y bueno, no es objeto de esta ponencia, pero mi ponencia se resumía a lanzar ahí la invitación, pero hacer historia oral no es solo oralidad, ¿no? Es decir, es una metodología, ¿no? Que tiene, y por eso también las limitantes de institucionalizarlo, es decir, necesitas grupos especializados, entrenados para hacer esto, es decir, llevar a cabo una entrevista no es llevar a cabo una plática, ¿no? Que, por ejemplo, los primeros proyectos de historia oral en el Smithsonian tuvieron a veces ciertos problemillas por eso, ¿no? Que parecían más entrevistas radiofónicas, ¿no? Que otras cosas, ¿no? Y cómo no solo llevar a cabo la entrevista, sino qué hacer con ella, ¿no? Y cómo tratar la fuente oral, porque no solo es que te da posibilidades, sino también te da otras problemáticas para bien y para mal, ¿no? Porque ahí estás tratando con la memoria, ¿no? Y la memoria tiene otros componentes y a veces otros fines, ¿no? Uno tiene memorias y recuerda, y el que tienes enfrente tiene cierta agenda y tú tienes otra agenda, ¿no? Entonces, tratar todas estas cuestiones requiere un equipo especializado, ¿no? Y también hacer un proyecto de historia oral también requiere alguien que se siente a pensar esto, no solo es a quien entrevistamos y está padre, ¿no? Entonces requiere una curaduría también documental, hacer entrevistas, ¿no? Entonces creo que también va por ahí mi comentario de, bueno, no, en México diríamos no son enchiladas, o sea, no es fácil, hay que hacerlo bien.
Pues muchas gracias. Si no hay ningún otro comentario o pregunta de nuestra audiencia, dejamos ir a nuestros ponentes y nos vemos de regreso a la 1, ¿verdad?
Sí.
A la 1 para el siguiente set de conferencias. Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes. Have a very big coffee break.
Hello, Mika.
Hello,
Welcome.
thank you very much. Nice to be here,
Yeah.
even only at a distance.
We are going to share your presentation. It's number 4.
Yeah,
We'll leave the Q&A question session for the end.
okay, that's fine. Yes.
And one more question. Your last name is Niemann or Naiman?
Well, Niemann is better.
Niemann. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll
Thank you.
start in a bit. Thank you. Sí, Emanuel, buenos días. Bueno,
Hola, buenos días.
buenos días, Emanuel. Muchas gracias. Ahorita ya vamos a empezar.
Vale. Perfecto.
Gracias. Schedule. This is the last session for collection documentation. We've had a very interesting journey from yesterday and today with 6 different sessions, very enriching about the different models and processes for collection documentation. And in this last session, we're going to listen to Emmanuel. If that's right with you, we'll start with your presentation. It's called in Spanish, Divulgación de las colecciones científicas albergadas en los museos universitarios. Digitalización y creación de exposiciones virtuales. By
Buenas tardes,
Emmanuel
mi nombre es Emmanuel Sterk-Moga y a continuación
Alicia Sánchez Ortiz y Óscar Hernández Muñoz. Entonces vamos a transmitir un video con la presentación. Muchas gracias.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Emmanuel Sterk-Moga y a continuación voy a presentar la ponencia titulada Divulgación de las colecciones científicas albergadas en los museos universitarios, digitalización y creación de exposiciones virtuales 3D. Los museos universitarios constituyen una tipología peculiar de artefactos científicos estrechamente asociada a la docencia y a la investigación. Los artefactos de anatomía humana, animal y vegetal seleccionados para este trabajo reflejan una estrecha relación entre la ciencia y el arte y en ellos se puede ver el rigor científico alcanzado para la formación de diversos especialistas. Estas herramientas pedagógicas han desempeñado un papel crucial en el avance de la ciencia desde el siglo XVIII hasta principios del siglo XX. Sin embargo, a medida que han ido evolucionando las metodologías educativas, han surgido otros sistemas alternativos, lo que ha provocado una disminución de la popularidad de estos artefactos. Hoy en día se conservan en diferentes museos universitarios con mayor o menor acceso, depende de cada colección. También se encuentran en diferentes espacios departamentales, generalmente con un acceso más limitado, y también en diferentes almacenes de las propias instituciones. Debido a la falta de visibilidad que presentan estas colecciones y la necesidad de preservación, esta ponencia recoge como objetivos abordar algunos de los retos que se plantean durante la digitalización 3D de estas colecciones. Este esfuerzo sirve para establecer diferentes espacios virtuales en 3D que no solamente alberguen estos modelos anatómicos, sino que den cabida a otras aplicaciones, por ejemplo, cómo mostrar los procesos de conservación y restauración en este tipo de artefactos. Además, estos entornos virtuales pretenden complementar los modelos educativos presentes en los museos universitarios. En última instancia, esta iniciativa pretende establecer la funcionalidad didáctica que estos modelos tuvieron, reintroduciéndolos en el entorno educativo, concretamente en las aulas. Para ello se ha recurrido a la fotogrametría como técnica de digitalización 3D. El potencial de la fotogrametría se debe principalmente al uso de la cámara, el tipo de objetivo, la configuración de los parámetros de la cámara y del entorno lumínico creado. Generalmente se obtiene unos niveles de detalle bastante aceptables en cuanto a la malla, pero el potencial de la fotogrametría se encuentra en la textura de color, ya que estamos trabajando con imágenes y si tenemos, por ejemplo, una cámara full frame, vamos a tener imágenes con una gran resolución y esto se traduce en una altísima calidad en la textura de color. También al trabajar con imágenes nos va a permitir realizar flujos de trabajos con gestión del color, lo cual va a asegurar la máxima calidad y precisión en la representación anatómica de cada uno de los órganos que conforman los modelos. La estrategia de captura seguida en este trabajo ha consistido en girar el objeto sobre una plataforma giratoria en un entorno de iluminación controlado. Y esto es debido a que los modelos necesitan tener una iluminación homogénea y difusa para registrarlos correctamente. Esta estrategia ha dado buenos resultados prácticamente en todos los modelos, a excepción de los modelos botánicos, de algunos de ellos en concreto, debido, por ejemplo, a los espesores tan finos que presentan en los pétalos, como es en este caso, ya que se han generado diferentes errores en la malla. Y como podéis ver en la imagen de la derecha, también en la textura de color hay zonas bastante borrosas. Esto se debe principalmente a la profundidad de campo. Generalmente en la fotogrametría se recomienda trabajar con focales medias en torno a 8. Tampoco recomiendan trabajar con focales muy abiertas o muy cerradas porque se generan aberraciones cromáticas y distorsiones. En esta investigación hemos intentado aumentar la profundidad de campo trabajando con una focal de 16, por ejemplo, y con ello hemos conseguido, en este caso, mejorar los resultados, como podéis ver tanto en la malla como en la textura de color. Por tanto, bueno, en este modelo ha dado buenos resultados, pero no hay una norma general para todos los modelos. Se tienen que estudiar individualmente cada uno de ellos y aplicar la estrategia concreta. Una vez digitalizados los modelos, fue necesario realizar procesos de ritopología de la malla para convertir las densas mallas en triángulos de la fotogrametría en mallas con un peso más ligero, en quads, polígonos de 4 vértices, y posteriormente realizar el mapeado de la textura sobre la nueva malla generada de estos polígonos de quads. Esto es necesario para poder posteriormente alojarlos en diferentes plataformas web. Una vez optimizados los modelos mediante un programa de infografía 3D, como puede ser Blender, se ha procedido a modelar los entornos museísticos y los espacios virtuales necesarios para posteriormente llevarlos a la plataforma de difusión Sketchfab. Sketchfab es una plataforma líder en el mercado actual, ya que presenta es una cantidad ingente de contenidos 3D y también tiene un gran apartado dedicado al patrimonio cultural. Una de las grandes ventajas que presenta frente a otras plataformas es que permite insertar anotaciones. Hay que tener en cuenta que los modelos didácticos, sobre todo los del siglo XIX, son clásicos, la mayoría de ellos, y por tanto, mediante este sistema de anotaciones hemos podido incorporar todos los modelos que conforman cada artefacto, de tal manera que podemos ir abriéndolo y ver con detalle cada una de las partes anatómicas. Con esta metodología se ha pretendido volver a llevar estos modelos a las aulas para que los estudiantes puedan complementar su formación a través de diferentes tablets o teléfonos móviles, viendo las partes anatómicas en las cuales hemos insertado informaciones y descripciones específicas de cada zona anatómica, de tal manera que complementen la formación durante las explicaciones del docente. Por otro lado, algunas universidades y facultades tienen la posibilidad de generar estos pequeños museos universitarios y en este caso concreto, al exponer este modelo anatómico compuesto por 25 piezas, expuesto totalmente de manera montada, pues no vamos a poder apreciar su totalidad y calidad científica que presenta. Por ello, aprovechando el modelo 3D, escaneando un código QR junto al modelo, el espectador puede desglosar cada parte anatómica para analizarla detalladamente, incluso pudiendo ver cada parte anatómica de manera individual con mayor detalle aún. Con esto se ha pretendido complementar el recorrido y la calidad expositiva de este pequeño museo. En aquellos casos en los cuales muchos departamentos o facultades no tienen esos medios para crear estos pequeños museos, como es este caso de esta colección de modelos botánicos en los cuales pues se encuentran en un departamento, hemos creado una exposición virtual con el objetivo de poder llegar a un público mucho más amplio que el propio personal del entorno de la comunidad universitaria. Por último, con esta misma metodología se ha pretendido también mostrar otro tipo de exposiciones, como pueden ser el análisis de diferentes procesos de conservación y restauración. Pero además, en esta exposición en concreto, mediante diferentes anotaciones, hemos introducido diferente información y artículos científicos para complementar cada uno de los tratamientos específicos de los artefactos con el objetivo de que los alumnos puedan enriquecer y complementar la formación adquirida en las diferentes aulas por parte de los docentes. Bueno, pues esto es todo. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Emanuel. Él está en línea y vamos a esperar al final para las preguntas y respuestas. Ahora vamos a escuchar a Amal Hamdi. Es una presentación que ella va a hacer, pero está hecha junto con Mohamed Ibrahim. Y la presentación se llama en inglés Approach to Technological Use, the Role of Digital Preservation in Colonial Cultural Heritage Sites, Documentation in Egypt. Oh, this way. Hi. Approach to technological use, the role of digital preservation in colonial culture heritage site documentation in Egypt. The table of content, the registration and documentation for tangible and intangible heritage, colonial culture heritage site and events in Egypt, technological documentation of colonial heritage sites, and the Egyptian colonial heritage and the story behind is the research project. The normal process for registration and documentation for tangible and intangible heritage in Egypt, it is starting with the registration, and the definition for registration is a scientific documentation process maintained for the purpose of research, studies, preservation, and publication of own rights to the collection. We already have in Egypt types of registers include temporary, general, and private, and catalog. Site and museum registers, it's a tool that secures the heritage of diffused objects and provide specific information. This is one of our registers in Egypt. And another tool, it's regarding the archives and records. It's a practice for the heritage preservation regarding the historical societies government and excavation colleague and universe archives, special collection archive, museum records, and regent archives. Digital preservation, it's database, it's collection database, it's consists of object records data and media and links and conservation report, exhibition records. And the main features, it's cataloging, acquisition, deacquisition, loans and conditions, and conservation report, security, and multimedia. And now Egyptian conservation can use many modern technology tools and documentation and restore the archaeological collection. Example, the tools Portable XRF and FTIR and FORS. Colonial culture heritage site and event in Egypt. Colonial culture heritage site and event in Egypt, the diversity of historical places and events enhance the study and documentation of colonial cultural heritage in Egypt. Regarding the palace and houses of leaders, ceremonies, protocols, and external relations, battlefields, war memorials, and the killing locations, and cemeteries and tombs. The research problem is colonial heritage sites in Egypt are not exposed despite their availability and diversity. And the second is the stakeholders, and the third is funding. Research objective, the research on colonial heritage sites in Egypt to explore the historical wars and the behind the story in depth to be preserved, documentation, and reused. And revives the communicating builds of the renews of the colonials and revives the heritage of popular residents, attracting different segments of society, especially young people, to become a part of the national heritage and affirm their national identity. The research strengths the unique culture, heritage, and long history of Egypt, the diversity in heritage site and with different stories, Egyptian strong destination brand and travel markets, opportunities, the cooperative protocols between different sectors and ministers in Egypt, including the implementation of new projects relevant to the colonial culture heritage site. Partner with the private sector through e-marketing, virtual reality tours, and exhibitions. The weakness is undeveloped product as a destination serves and facilities at most the heritage site, lack of professional management skills and technological use. No clear market strategy for clear e-commerce and e-marketing, lack of awareness. And this reads it already that the dynamic and the human factors, economic breakdown, national disaster, crisis, and political issues and wars. The role of digital preservation and colonial culture heritage sites, technological use. The objectives of digital preservation for Egyptian colonial culture heritage site documentation, using technological approach to implement the storytelling documentation and interpretation the colonialism history of relevant events. Use the culture heritage tangible and intangible to convert the falsification of facts and interactive methods for a new type of tourism in Egypt. And this is the benefit of digital documentation regarding motivation, interpretation, and destination management. And it helps in who are you, and digital preservation, interpretation, and experience, loyalty, confirm, show who you are, and the identity regarding know who you are.
The role of digital preservation and documentation is regarding digital projects. We can use digital teams, virtual reality, hologram, mobile app, website, database, and also the research. How digitalization contributes the display of colonial culture heritage sites. Attraction offer an excellent way. Entertainment, a mix of amusement and entertainment. Interpretation, new interactive connection between audience and heritage. Educational, more attractive tool and learning. Usability, user can quickly find the required content. This example for digital STEAM. This is Panorama, 6 October War. It's in Egypt, and it already exists for building. And this is another example, not for Egypt, virtual tour damaged Arab heritage sites. And this is another uses regarding the mobile app website and this objectives. The mobile app targets the visitor to enhance their experience, and we already have lack and shortage in this colonial culture heritage site. No mobile app, no websites, no locations, and it's already isolated. And we starting to plan the visits, WhatsApp program events, and set mission and vision, learning, educational programs, and research, and create library and archives. The technological documentation of colonial heritage sites. This is the proposed database regarding the colonial cultural heritage site database in Egypt. We classified regarding war sites and museums, locations, and the name of the organization or the sites. And graphs, forts, massacres, and leaders' houses and palaces. Memorial moments. This is the proposed shape for the database. It could be a cooperation between partnership between the public and private sector. The technological documentation of colonial heritage sites, there is 3 axes or categories regarding the first one, events, and we already have Don Shuai incident. This is a famous incident from 1906. And the second events, for example, it's regarding the bombing of Bahr al-Baqar primary school. It's something similar to the Japanese museum for I can't remember. It's a museum regarding the bombing in Japanese for the school Hiroshima. Yeah, Hiroshima. It's already museum set up and already have the documentation and technology and whatever. We already have this location and the place for this school. It's already be a museum, but it's not updated, not documented, not registered, no technology, and it's appreciated story and event regarding this event, this situation in Egypt. And the third, it's regarding the 6-day war at Naksa in Egypt. It was the famous brief war that took place in 1967, and regarding that, we already attacked from Israel Air Force. The second X, it's historical and house places for the president and the leaders. One of the famous houses in Egypt, and it's already being a museum with high technology use and documentation. It's Gamal Abdel Nasser House in Manshiet al-Bakri in Cairo. And this house is already being a museum in Egypt. We can find the new structure for the house. The right side is the old house, and the other side is extension regarding them to the museum scenario. This is one of photos regarding the present house and the objects. The story of a nation. This is a lot of technological use and the stories and for the events in this period. And the third X is related to remains. And we already have a lot of places regarding the remains, regarding the digging of the old Suez Canal and the Battle of Alamein, Tal el-Farma, and Arish Castle. This is the Egyptian colonial heritage proposal, and it's regarding the story behind. It's a private sector. It's a project, research project, find solutions and outcome. The solution implementing and promoting tourism and destinations, Egypt, and trade market for colonial tourism in various heritage sites. What's behind? This is the logo in Arabic. It's meaning what's behind. This what's behind is the private sector startup. It's already the first Egyptian service provides colonial tourism. You will find a new info and a lot of heritage atmosphere and our expert. And what's behind one of the tourism startups that will manage different activities for colonial destination. And the outcome is regarding awareness, videos, exhibition, workshops, website building, and VR activities for tourists. This is the proposal for Bahr al-Baqar Primary School. Could play. ¿No playing?
¿Le ayudas? Dice que no se puede.
Can I get it from the folder? The folder? You have the folder? Okay. Here. Cidoc. No playing.
Uy, necesitamos una extensión.
No? Not work. Okay. This is one of the moves you already created regarding this event in Egypt. And this is proposed photo also. And this is interactive methods for this proposed technological colonial site stories in Egypt, the Denshwai village and the Tal el-Farma and Larish Castle and 1967 Naksa and digging of the old Suez Canal and Al-Alamein digging. Thank you. Very nice. From here, yeah.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to listen to Mika. Sorry. Yes, to Ivana Chirich with a presentation towards intertwined data, building inclusive museum documentation in Serbia using blockchain technology.
Forward.
Can start. Thank you.
Hello to everyone. Buenos dias a todos. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here. This is my first time over the Atlantic Sea. So I'm Ivana Chiric. I work at the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade, in Serbia. That's in Europe, small country. Although it is a small museum with a small space for permanent exhibition, it has been the most visited museum in Serbia, in the many years. So considering that we are cooperating with various institutions in our country and abroad, preserving and sharing data is extremely important to us. So we started recently thinking about introducing the blockchain technology into our daily work. Most of you maybe didn't heard about Nikola Tesla. He's a famous world scientist and he's Serb. We preserve in this museum his entire legacy, consists of a library, his personal items, which are sorted by collection, and of course, maybe the most important, his extensive archive, which consists of 200,000 papers, and it is declared as cultural good of great importance in Serbia, and also as well recognized by UNESCO and included in the World Memory Register. So, although the first museum in Serbia was founded way back in 1844, the museum practice in Serbia developed very slowly due to frequent armed conflict in this country. However, in some of our museums, you can see some of the world's most famous masterpieces of art. So if you are, if you come to Serbia, please take a look of these famous paintings in the National Museums of Serbia. So you see that we have around 100 museums and 40 galleries around. And UNESCO also did some research back way to 2020 in May. And I don't have a pointer, but across the Italy, yellow country, we have 20.6 museums per 1 million inhabitants. It's not a lot, but considering that we are a small country, I think it's really fine. Considering the blockchain technology in Serbia, we have to take into account ongoing practice regarding the museum artifacts data collection, and to examine necessary conditions for blockchain technology and whether those conditions and criteria are met. First challenge is the loose legal framework in Serbia and insufficient compliance with international standards. Secondly, digitization process is progressive very, very slowly. You will see some charts in a minute. However, the main problem remains that we do not have a unique database. So we do not have a central register of movable cultural goods in Serbia. Here you can see some of our laws. We have a set of laws that regulate museum activities and culture as well. This is only a few of them. And as you can see at the left-hand side, only one law and two subordinate regulations mention this cultural register of movable cultural goods. However, this is a starting point, and it is at most important for the blockchain implementation. We had a couple of central registers back in the past. They are listed here. Eternitas was quite good. I used to work in that database. This database covered minimum data needed to describe museum object by Museum Documentation Association, Hague Convention, ISO standards as well, and of course CRM. So this is how it used to look. User interface was also quite well done. And during this time, so from 2009 to 2014, we collected data for more than 220,000 artifacts, which included more than 4 million data systematically collected. And then the program was closed, terminated. So we lost all data. Yes, unfortunately, true story. And now from 2019, we have a new unique information system called IMUS. It is managed by Historical Museum of Serbia, which is not, by the way, central institutions for museums. So it is also a little sketchy thing. This is also pretty nicely done database, but we have to do all over again. And it is really hard. And by the law, all museums are required to establish this information system and to digitize entire cultural heritage within the 5 years, which is so from 2019 to 2023. That's not possible, of course, but that is in the law. So this is the report. I think it was published 2 months ago. So only 38 of museums and galleries submitted this report on the 5-year plan. And as you can see, this is not all, of course. The report has around 200 pages. But what is interesting is that only 5% of museums have access to internet. A number of employees in museums who deal with digitization is very low. 60%, oh, I must hurry, sorry. 60% of museums does not have a person who deal with digitization, and so on and so on. Because the state did not approve new working position. So, but yet they require that we do this. So it is like a catch-22. Okay, I will hurry. So this is the most important part, actually. We figure out that we must not wait for the government, and we have to do something about data and sort of things. So we all agree that current state in Serbia is at low level. Even with this EMUS database, museums rely on central database and paper records, which can lead to limited accessibilities, data silos, inefficiency, and so on. And also museum documentation remains inaccessible to researchers and broader public. So this is one maybe solution for, and this smart contract is only for demonstration purpose only. In real life scenario, we may want to include additional features, but this is a proposal how we can store basic informations. Of course, we can do a lot of different stuff and take into consideration data logic validation, most important. In addition, we can, we can store, we can find a way to store reference on images and documentation, because we cannot store images directly on blockchain. It is not efficient. We can store them in IPFS or cloud storage, and only store a reference of them in blockchain. So like URLs, format, and so on. And lastly, we must always make sure that we define a set of rules for verification to authenticate all data. And because I'm running out of time, I will conclude that museum community in Serbia does not have government support at all, but we have a lot of ideas. We have a great will to change things, to move things around, and at some point we will have this database and with data that no one could delete again. Thank you. Okay, yes, of course.
Thank you very much, Ivana. And our last presentation will be with Mika Niemann. He is from the MINAR IA Artificial Intelligence Technologies Ltd institution. And his presentation is ITIF, OCR, and HTR in the creation of the thematic digital services for cultural heritage. This presentation is also recorded, and at the end we'll have a session of questions and answers with all four of them. We have Emmanuel and Mika online. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Finland. My name is Mika Nyman, and I work with IT in the context of museums. This presentation will focus on the National Museum of Afghanistan. I will mainly touch on three technologies that are useful in the creation of something I called thematic digital services for cultural heritage. First, a few words about the history of the museum. Afghanistan is located on the Silk Road from east to west, and this means that it has received influences from both directions, from China as well as from Greece. As such, Afghanistan can be called a mirror of world cultures. The National Museum of Afghanistan was founded in 1919, but currently we mainly remember Afghanistan from its recent wars. An important turn of events was the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1989, and this led to the Soviet-Afghan War. And coupled with that war was the Afghan Civil War. So there was a sequence of war-related events from 89 to 96. During these years, some 70% of the National Museum's collections were looted or destroyed. In this era, the museum also functioned as a military base, and as a result of that, there were rocket attacks against the museum in two events in 1993 and 1994. Some years later, 2 years later, the Taliban rose into power. And what is often forgotten is that in the initial phase, the Taliban actually wanted to safeguard and protect the museum's artifacts. But this policy then changed in 2001. And as a result of this change of policy, there was destruction of a cultural heritage, including destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas, which many of you are aware of. The same year occurred the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center in New York. And this led to Western forces attacking Afghanistan and putting in place a Western-supported regime. This situation continued then until 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, in 2021, President Ashraf Ghani left the country, and there was a chaotic evacuation of Western workers and people who had collaborated with the Western forces, and also many Afghans decided to leave the country. The Western forces withdrew completely, and currently the Taliban are back in power. Now, from the National Museum's point of view, the return of Taliban to power was a very frightening prospect indeed. But the director of the National Museum, Muhammad Fahim Rahimi, decided to take the risk and stay behind and defend his museum without knowing what the future would be for the museum and the country. So he took a great personal risk, and this was an act of heroism that should be remembered. Now, Mohammed Fahim Rahimi managed to negotiate with the Taliban, and there were no destruction or looting of the museum. The museum was allowed to resume operation, and it actually started to operate under the protection of the Taliban. So this means that the museum and the Taliban returned to the situation pre-2001. So if you remember what I said earlier, at that first stage of the Taliban regime, the Taliban actually decided to protect the cultural heritage of the country. And we are currently now in this same situation. And the museum is now extending its influence to museums in other parts of the country, such as Kandahar, Herat, and Balkh. Now, the situation is not without risk, but there are, the situation is nonetheless, in my view, you might say that it's promising. Then a few words about my own encounter with the museum. When the Taliban came into power 2 years ago, that was, of course, in many ways a frightening situation. But from my point of view, I thought that now 30 years of war has come to an end. Now, this assessment is based on my own history, because I have worked previously in a humanitarian context and visited many conflict areas. So my view on the situation was a bit different than the general one. So I started to keep in touch with Mohammed Fahim Rahimi, the director of the museum, and I have been pursuing that contact since. It is my view that the obligation or calling of the international museum community right now is not to isolate Afghanistan, or at least not to isolate the National Museum of Afghanistan, but to let the museum form international connections. And this is what I'm currently trying to achieve. Now, I have some practical goals, rather simple goals for my own work. And those goals are to recover the internet domain of the museum, which has been lost, and creating an internet strategy for the museum. And as I said, also restoring contacts with the international museum community. And then I hope if I get financing, I would like to visit the museum and visit Afghanistan. Now I have to go back to one of the previous slides. In the beginning of this year, the director, Mohammed Fahim Rahimi, decided to leave the country. So the museum got a new director, deputy director Muhammad Zubair Abedi. And after a period of his governance, the museum is now taken over by a permanent director, Mulabi Sigbatullah Abed, and he's an Islamic scholar, which is an interesting situation. Now, as you know, the situation of girls and women in Afghanistan is currently problematic, and this also affects the work of the National Museum. So this is something that should be tackled as a part of the process of opening up the museum for international cooperation and contacts. And having an Islamic scholar as the director of the museum actually enables an informed dialogue of these questions. So my hope is that there would occur such an open and informed dialogue between the museum and the international museum community. My own hope is that this cooperation with the international community would open up opportunities for education and training for women in the fields of museology, conservation, art history, and information technology. Now, this is something that is completely normal all over the world in other museums. So this could happen in Afghanistan too, but we just have to believe that this can happen, and we should pursue that goal. So now, returning to the technical side. As I said earlier, the culture of Afghanistan is a part of world culture, and as a result of this, items related to the culture of Afghanistan are, of course, located inside Afghanistan, but also outside the countries in different museums and institutions. And one idea I have been pursuing is the creation of something I call virtual collections. And this is something that can happen in the digital space. So a virtual collection connects items from different institutions, different kinds of institutions, and institutions located in different parts of the world. And in parallel to virtual collections, I believe that it's also important and necessary to create a kind of a virtual community between experts living inside Afghanistan, but also experts outside Afghanistan, Afghans living in the diaspora, but also researchers from different parts of the world who have expert knowledge on Afghanistan. So based on this grounding, I mean, the virtual collection and the virtual community, one can then build kind of what I call a narrative layer. In this conference, we are talking about linked data, but I would like to broaden that concept a bit further and talk about linked stories. So this narrative layer is formed of such linked stories, and this structure with a virtual collection and with linked stories or a narrative layer, they form what I call a thematic service for cultural heritage. Now then, going into a bit more into detail on the technical side, there are three technologies that I think will be useful in the creation of such thematic services. One of them is the International Image Interoperability Framework, and it provides a standardized way to connect image resources from different institutions and collections. And it enables controlled access and preserving of metadata of pictorial resources. And it is specifically developed in the context of culture. So I don't have the opportunity to show this in detail or in practice, but I have a link shown on this page to which you can return, and this is something that can be tested out. Then a second technology I have been working with is optical character recognition. And this is really something, I mean, that has been around for many years. But in spite of that, it's quite challenging when you work with texts, let's say in Arabic or in Persian, which I have been doing. So if you work with these kinds of languages, there are some specific problems, and one of the problems is that text can be bidirectional. That is, it can be a mixture of let's say Arabic and Western languages. You can have Western words inserted in the text, and you can have quotation marks and so on, which messes up the automatic processing of the text. So in my experience, if you work with an Arabic printed text, it takes about 15 minutes to process one single page. And this is mainly due to the fact that the automatic processing of the text has to be corrected manually. And it is this manual correction that takes a lot of time. So if you have 100 pages you want to process, that takes about 25 hours. And this is acceptable for limited materials, but if you have a broad text corpus, then these traditional or simple optical character recognition technologies and software, they are not sufficient. You need something else. And there is where a new technology based on artificial intelligence comes into play, and it is called handwritten text recognition. And this is then something I have been working on. And here in the links, you can see links to three software projects or libraries: Scriptorium, Pilaya, and Transcribus. There are some costs involved here. So in addition to having the technology work, you if you want to process large amounts of texts, you also need to have a budget in place. But these technologies are very promising, and they are currently used on an industrial scale in many countries, including Finland. Now there is an elderly Afghan poet living in Finland called Muhammad Ebrahim Rosta, and he has a collection of poems, over 100 bindings of texts, and these form together about 100,000 pages. So it's a very extensive material. And here on the slide, you can see an example of one of the pages. And I'm now starting to process his material using these handwritten text recognition technologies. And my hope is that we can produce a digital collection of his poetry. But for me, this is actually a test material, which I then mainly want to use in the context of the National Museum of Afghanistan, and specifically in the process of processing manuscripts. And these manuscripts can then be used in the creation of the thematic digital services for cultural heritage that I'm pursuing. So this was my brief presentation. I'm sorry I can't be there in person with you. It would be lovely to meet you all and discuss with you and plan further, but I hope there will be ways to keep in touch and pursue these matters I have been talking about, and especially form contacts to the National Museum of Afghanistan, and in the best case, open up opportunities for training and employment for girls and women too in Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's well, I feel it's a gift to be in this table presenting you, because we have seen scientific collections and social sciences collections in very different types and levels of documentation for different countries: Spain, Serbia, Egypt, Afghanistan, and two interesting comments that are general in all of the presentations: the relationship with the government, and that museums never escape political context. No, so I don't know if you have any questions, because I have a lot. We have the world in this table. Yes.
Thank you. Christina McGregor from University College London. I wanted to ask Amal a question, if I may. You mentioned, where are we? Sorry, on my notes. When you were talking about the benefits, Amal, you mentioned destination management when you were talking about the benefits of digital documentation. And I wondered if you could just explain a little bit more about that.
Let's have the other question.
Tetsuro from Japan. I have a question for Dr. Ivana. So I have two questions. So first one is the blockchain technology used only for provenance of information of collection?
Sorry, I cannot hear you very well. Can you please louder?
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
So is a blockchain technology used only for the provenance information, or the collection, provenance information of the collection, or include the collection metadata? Second one, if you know what type of blockchain are you using for the project, such as Ethereum or Polygon, and etc.
Hi, Christina. Regarding your questions, the destination management, because we already in Egypt have isolated areas and sites regarding the situations of colonial heritage sites. And it's already under the hand of the Ministry of Defense. So these areas, it's not used, not non-visits. There is no connections. So we starting to work in a project to develop these sites, to create technological use for these sites in order to enhance and reuse these sites and the area, the destination management for all. As we know, if we already have sites in a town, it should be a tourism destination. So we already have all over the world the colonial museums and sites and whatever, it already used and visits. In Egypt, at non-visits. There is a lot of small museums working and no photos, no visits, a little bit, but there is a lot of sites with interactive tools we can use to revive this situation and the sites and all the destination. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you for your questions. Of course, we must put metadata on the blockchain, of course, so that it can be readable to other resources as well. And this smart contract was done in Solidity in Ethereum blockchain. So it is, I think it is the best for now for this purpose, but also I think it has a downside because Ethereum gas fee is much expensive, but I am expecting that that layer 2 that they're announcing long, so maybe then we could work without afraid to lose money when working on Ethereum blockchain. So thank you.
Hi, my question is for Ivana. I want to ask you, you are going to blockchain because you have fear to lose your data again?
Yes, yes, and yes. I think for now, the blockchain may be the safest way to store something for future generation. It is hard. We do not have enough knowledge and we don't have funds, so we have to do all by ourselves and to find I myself only have a working knowledge, so I'm not a programmer, but I'm learning. Maybe I will be one someday, but definitely I think that's the best and surest way to preserve museum artifacts data. So also as well as images and documentation references on decentralized storage. So nothing centralized is not an option for future. So thank you.
And is not very slow to access to data?
So does me, sorry?
Slow.
No te escuchamos.
Is very slow to access data in blockchain.
Yes, but it is shady, so we can do it because they don't know how to prevent us, because they didn't give us another alternative. So we have ongoing working roundtables with our government because we have we have actually very alive museum society. And we are always asking something. We are going to their offices, and so they're really careful when considering to say no. So I think that we will have support for this. It's a matter of time, but we will have it. So is that the answer? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Any more questions? No? Well, we are going, I don't know, first of all, I want to thank Emmanuel and Mika. I don't know if you want to add any comment on your presentations first before we leave. Yes, Mika.
Just a brief comment that if someone wants to keep in touch and become a part of this international network to support the National Museum of Afghanistan, you're welcome to contact me, and you will find my email on these slides and through the organizers too. So you're welcome to be in touch.
Thank you.
Great. Emmanuel? Think we lost him or something.
Hola.
Ah,
Bueno, no tengo nada, nada que añadir. No sé si no tenéis algunas dudas o algo. Por mi parte, bueno, pues la verdad es que bueno, todas las ponencias han sido interesantes, pero bueno, no tengo ninguna cuestión de momento.
okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here and sharing these very interesting experiences from your work. And we have some information about food. No, food is already there, so we can just leave. Remember that we have a third presentation at 4 p.m. and then we are off to the Museum Frida Kahlo, the ones that have registered. Okay. Thank you. Claro, aquí tenemos. Oh, claro que sí.